The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as I pushed my cleaning cart through the 50th floor of Obsidian Tower, the rain outside lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows like angry fingers trying to get in. 3 in the morning, and the prestigious offices stood empty of their daytime occupants, the wealthy executives and power brokers who walked past me as if I were invisible when our paths occasionally crossed during shift changes. I liked it better this way, just me and the occasional security guard, the silence allowing my mind to wander as my hands worked through the familiar motions of dusting, vacuuming, and emptying trash bins. My name tag read, Elena Vasquez, night janitor, though few ever bothered to look at it or me. I carefully wiped around the framed photographs on a mahogany desk, images of stern men in expensive suits shaking hands with politicians, their smiles never reaching their eyes. My body ached from exhaustion, the result of juggling this night cleaning job with day classes as I struggled to finish my accounting degree at 32, a dream deferred when our parents died and left me to raise my brother Marco. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a text from him that made my stomach clench with familiar anxiety. Need $800 for tuition by Friday, or they will drop my classes. I leaned against the desk, momentarily closing my eyes against the wave of desperation that washed over me. The $800 might as well have been $8 million for all my ability to produce it by Friday, yet I had to find a way. Marco deserved the opportunities I never had. His brilliance a flame I refused to let the world extinguish for something as meaningless as money. I had already picked up extra shifts this month, sold my old laptop, and eaten nothing but ramen for weeks, but it still wasn't enough. As I resumed my cleaning, moving from office to office with mechanical efficiency, Frank, the night security guard, passed by on his rounds, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners as he paused to chat. You are the hardest worker in this building, Elena. Unlike these suits who just move money around, you actually accomplish something, he said with sincere admiration that briefly warmed my perpetually cold hands. I smiled in return, appreciating his kindness, even as I wondered what the occupants of these gleaming offices would think if they knew the invisible woman who emptied their trash cans dreamed of sitting behind one of these desks someday, of using numbers to create order rather than using mops to erase their existence. The storm outside intensified, sheets of rain now obscuring the city lights beyond the glass, and I moved my cart toward the executive floor, the rarefied space I rarely cleaned but had been assigned tonight due to another janitor calling in sick, unaware that crossing that threshold would irrevocably alter the course of my carefully planned life. The executive floor was eerily silent as I pushed my cart past paintings worth more than my yearly salary, the plush carpet muffling the squeak of my wheels. This floor was usually off-limits to the night cleaning staff, a mysterious realm I had only heard about from other janitors who spoke of its luxury in hushed, reverent tones. They were right. The dark wood paneling gleamed with the kind of polish that spoke of old money, and Italian leather furniture dotted the space like islands of excess in a sea of privilege. I was halfway through dusting a massive reception desk when I heard it. Voices. Coming from the corner office at the end of the hallway, the grandest one with double doors of polished mahogany and a nameplate that read Dante Ricci, CEO. The office that should have been empty at 3:30 in the morning. Curiosity and concern warred within me as I approached slowly, the voices growing clearer with each step. One was pleading, desperate. The other was cold, controlled, dangerous in its quietness. I told myself I should turn around, return to my cart, pretend I heard nothing, but my body continued forward, as if pulled by an invisible thread. The door was slightly ajar, offering a sliver of visibility into the luxurious space beyond, where city lights glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows. I froze when I saw them. A man tied to a chair, face bloodied and swollen with fear, and standing over him, the most strikingly handsome man I had ever seen, tall and imposing in a perfectly tailored suit despite the late hour. His dark hair was immaculately styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and though he couldn't have been older than his late 20s, his pale blue eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had seen far more than his years should allow. I realized with a jolt that this must be Dante Ricci himself, the mysterious owner whose name adorned the building but whose face I had never seen. "Please, Mr. Ricci, I did not know they were watching the docks," the bound man sobbed. "I swear I am loyal." The words dissolved into a choked gurgle as Ricci pulled out a silenced pistol with the casual ease of someone selecting a pen. The sound that followed was not the bang of cinema gunshots, but a dull thud that nonetheless caused my entire body to clench in horror. A strangled gasp escaped my lips before I could stop it, and my trembling hands dropped the spray bottle I had been clutching. The plastic clattered against the marble floor entrance like a death knell announcing my presence. Time seemed to slow as both Ricci and the other man in the room, a mountain of muscle with a shaved head, turned toward the door. Pale blue eyes locked with mine through the crack, widening slightly in surprise before narrowing with dangerous intent. Adrenaline surged through my system like electricity, and I ran. My feet carried me to the emergency stairwell before my brain had fully processed the command to flee. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart thundering so loudly I feared they could track me by its sound alone. "Please do not let them recognize me," I prayed to whatever god might be listening. "Please let me disappear back into invisibility, where I belong." I arrived at work the next evening with my hands shaking so badly I could barely swipe my access card, but I needed this job too desperately to call in sick. My stomach dropped when the shift supervisor handed me my assignment for the night. Executive floor again. My legs felt like lead as I loaded my cart with supplies, rehearsing excuses in my head to avoid that floor, but finding none that would not raise suspicion. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like a funeral procession, each floor lighting up as I ascended toward what might be my own demise. The building seemed unnaturally quiet tonight, the usual ambient hum of machinery muted as if the tower itself was holding its breath. I noticed the security cameras tracking my movement, their tiny red lights blinking like malevolent eyes as I pushed my cart down the hallway. My heart nearly stopped when I reached the corner office. The door stood wide open, light spilling onto the carpet, and inside sat Dante Ricci himself, positioned behind his massive desk with preternatural calm. He wore another immaculate suit, his presence commanding the space with effortless authority, those striking features even more devastating up close than they had been through the crack in the door. His pale blue eyes studied me with the cold calculation of a predator assessing prey as he gestured for me to enter. I remained frozen in the doorway until he spoke, his voice smooth and cultured, sending chills down my spine as he recited facts about my life that should have been private. "Elena Vasquez, 32, single, supporting your brother through college, no criminal record, excellent work ethic." He pushed what I recognized as my employee file across the polished surface of his desk, my entire life reduced to papers in a folder. My fear crystallized into desperate courage as I blurted out that I wanted to quit, that I did not know what I saw and did not care, that I would not tell anyone if he would just let me walk away. His response froze the blood in my veins. "You are not going anywhere, not until I decide what to do with you." He continued with terrifying precision, listing my apartment address, my class schedule, and most chillingly, the location of my brother Marco at this very moment. His eyes never left mine as he detailed the coffee shop where Marco was currently studying, what he was wearing, even what he had ordered 30 minutes ago. The message was unmistakable. I was completely at his mercy. And worse, so was the person I loved most in this world. I stood rooted to the spot, trapped by invisible chains stronger than any physical restraint, as the reality of my situation became crystal clear. The invisible woman had been seen by the most dangerous man in the city, and now I could never disappear again. I reported to work the next night to discover my position had changed. Mr. Ricci had arranged what he called a promotion. I would now be his personal cleaner, responsible solely for maintaining his private penthouse that occupied the 2 floors above the executive offices. My supervisor seemed both impressed and slightly envious as she handed me a special access card. Explaining my salary would be doubled effective immediately. The penthouse was unlike anything I had ever seen outside of luxury magazines. A sprawling expanse of minimalist elegance with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city below. Italian marble floors gleamed beneath my feet, designer furniture arranged with mathematical precision, and priceless art adorned walls that soared to cathedral heights. Security cameras nestled in every corner, their presence a constant reminder that I was being watched. The contrast to my cramped one-bedroom apartment with its secondhand furniture and water stains was so stark it felt like stepping into another dimension. That first night I cleaned in silence, hyper-aware of every movement as Mr. Ricci worked at his desk, those pale blue eyes occasionally lifting to track my progress through the rooms. The doubled salary meant Marco could stay in school, that I could pay rent without choosing between electricity and food, that the constant knot of financial anxiety in my stomach could loosen slightly. Yet as I dusted around crystal decanters worth more than my car, I understood the bargain I had made. I was now completely dependent on the dangerous man whose private world I had been admitted to. Over the next weeks, I learned more about Dante Ricci than was safe to know. Phone calls he took while I polished surfaces nearby revealed the truth behind the legitimate business empire. The Ricci crime family, whispered about in news reports but never definitively linked to the handsome young CEO, controlled everything from shipping to construction, with Dante at its center like a spider in an elaborate web. I should run, I told myself each night as I returned to my apartment. But where would I go that he could not find me with his seemingly limitless resources and connections throughout the city and beyond? The immediate problem remained. Marco needed this money to stay in college, to build the future I had sacrificed everything to give him. So I returned each night, cleaning with meticulous care as Dante remained coldly professional, our interactions limited to brief instructions and acknowledgments. Yet I constantly felt his gaze following me, assessing, calculating, like a predator studying prey before deciding its fate. I told myself this arrangement was temporary, that once Marco graduated I would find a way out, but as days stretched into weeks, the gilded cage grew more comfortable even as its bars remained unyielding and absolute. After nearly a month of working in the penthouse, I found myself finishing my shift later than usual, the clock edging toward 4 in the morning as I descended to the lobby. The rain outside had transformed from a gentle patter to a roaring deluge, sheets of water cascading down the glass facade as thunder rolled across the sky. I hesitated by the reception desk, dreading the dash to the bus stop in such weather, when the elevator across from mine opened, disgorging a group of executives who should have left hours ago, their expensive suits rumpled, laughter too loud, movements unsteady from what was clearly an extended drinking session. They spotted me immediately, their conversation halting as predatory grins spread across their faces. The security desk stood empty, Frank nowhere to be seen as one of the men blocked my path, another circling behind me, the marble lobby suddenly feeling like a trap. The smell of expensive liquor washed over me as the apparent leader leaned in, asking what a pretty thing like me was doing here so late, his hand reaching toward my face. I stepped back, heart pounding, when a voice cut through the lobby like a steel blade. "The lady works for me directly," Dante Ricci said as he materialized from the shadows near the private elevator, his tall figure radiating controlled fury despite his perfectly calm tone. "Touch her again, and you will lose those hands." The effect was immediate, the men stumbling over apologies, faces pale as they practically ran for the exit, leaving me alone with my unlikely savior. He gestured toward his elevator, and I followed without question, the doors closing us into the small space as we ascended toward the penthouse. "Why did you help me?" I asked when I finally found my voice, expecting no answer from this man who rarely spoke to me beyond necessary instructions. "I protect what is mine," he replied, those 4 words sending a confusing shiver through me, frightening in their possessiveness, yet oddly comforting in their certainty. For the first time, I noticed shadows under his eyes, a slight loosening of his perfect composure as he leaned against the elevator wall. "You grew up in Riverside," he said unexpectedly, not a question but a statement of fact. "So did I, before my father built the family business." My surprise must have shown on my face because his mouth curved slightly at one corner. "People like us understand survival costs. Sometimes include moral compromises," he continued, studying my reaction with those penetrating blue eyes that suddenly seemed less cold. "We all do what we must to protect those we care about." The elevator doors opened to the penthouse, but something had shifted between us, the air charged with an emotion I could not name. He was still dangerous, still my captor in all the ways that mattered, yet in that moment I glimpsed something recognizable beneath the perfect facade, a shared understanding that disturbed me more than his threats ever had. I arrived at the penthouse for my evening shift to find the pristine white furniture stained with crimson, the metallic scent of blood hanging heavy in the air. Dante Ricci lay slumped against his Italian leather sofa, his normally immaculate suit torn and soaked with blood, his handsome face contorted with pain. The city lights flickered through the windows like distant warning signals as a storm gathered on the horizon. For one fleeting moment, I considered turning around and walking away, pretending I had seen nothing, but something deeper than fear propelled me forward. I dropped my cleaning supplies and rushed to his side, my hands already reaching for the decorative throw to press against the wound in his side. His pale blue eyes, clouded with pain, tracked my movements with confusion. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, voice ragged and lacking its usual commanding tone. "Because I am not like you," I responded. Applying pressure to slow the bleeding, I do not leave people bleeding, no matter who they are. I found a first aid kit in his bathroom, cleaning the wound with steady hands despite my racing heart, noting with grim assessment that while deep, the knife slash had missed vital organs. As I worked, Dante spoke through gritted teeth, blood loss making him vulnerable in ways I had never witnessed. "The Navarro family ambushed me outside the restaurant," he said, rivals who had been encroaching on Ricci territory for months. I listened in silence as he continued, the words spilling out as if a dam had broken, revealing how he had been thrust into leadership at 19 when his father was murdered, how he had taken control to protect his mother and 3 younger sisters, how he had never wanted this life, but had embraced it fully once it became his only option for keeping his family safe. Something inside me softened as I bandaged his wounds, recognizing echoes of my own story in his. I found myself telling him about the factory fire that took my parents when Marco was only 12, about dropping out of college to raise him, about the crushing responsibility of being both sister and parent while barely an adult myself. For the first time, I saw him truly looking at me, seeing beyond the invisible cleaning woman to the person beneath. The moment shattered when his phone rang, his face hardening as he listened to the caller. "They know about you," he said after ending the call, his voice regaining its steel edge despite his weakened state. "The Navarros identified you as someone close to me. They are planning to take you to get to me." My blood turned to ice at his words, understanding immediately the new danger I faced. No longer just a witness, but a target, a vulnerability to be exploited. "You need to stay here tonight," he continued, attempting to sit up despite the pain. "I will have security protocols activated immediately. We need to move you and your brother somewhere safe until this is resolved." The walls of my world contracted further, binding my fate even more tightly to his. Yet strangely, I felt less like a prisoner, and more like an ally as I helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as we moved toward his private office to make arrangements that would protect us both. Within 24 hours of the attack, I found myself and a confused but adaptable Marco relocated to a fortress-like estate outside the city limits, a sprawling mansion with stone walls, manicured gardens, and a security perimeter that would make a military base envious. Despite the circumstances that brought us here, the interior held a surprising warmth, with sunlight streaming through tall windows, fresh flowers in crystal vases, and the gentle sounds of classical music floating through hidden speakers. It was here I witnessed the duality of Dante Ricci in full display as he moved through his world with confident authority. With his security team, he was cold and calculating, issuing orders about patrol rotations and surveillance protocols with merciless precision. Yet with his elderly mother, who resided in the East Wing, he transformed entirely, his voice softening as he kissed her cheek, listened patiently to her stories, and ensured her favorite tea was prepared exactly to her preference. Marco adapted quickly, enchanted by the library and technology at his disposal, while I found myself caught in the gravitational pull of this complex man whose ruthlessness was matched only by his capacity for tenderness toward those under his protection. The peace shattered on our third night when the Navarro family breached the southern perimeter, triggering alarms that sent the household into controlled chaos. I was rushing to check on Marco when I spotted movement through a window, a shadow where no shadow should be, directly in the path Dante was taking toward the security room. I ran without thinking, intercepting him at the corridor junction, pulling him into an alcove seconds before gunfire erupted where he would have been standing. His eyes locked with mine in the darkness, recognition and something deeper passing between us as his security team neutralized the threat. In the aftermath, as dawn broke over the estate and the danger passed, Dante called me to his study, where marble fireplaces and leather-bound books created an atmosphere of timeless authority. "I have been considering your position since the night you saved my life," he said, those striking features softened by genuine gratitude. "You have seen everything now, both sides of my world. I am offering you a choice no one gave me. Stay and be protected, or leave with enough money to disappear." He outlined a position within his legitimate businesses, overseeing charitable foundations with a salary that made my head spin, complete with education funds for both Marco and myself. I stood at the precipice of decision, my mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions as I weighed returning to the struggle of an honest life against accepting security and opportunity from a man whose hands were stained with blood, but who had shown me genuine care and protection. The moral compromise seemed both impossible and inevitable as I looked into those pale blue eyes that had once terrified me, but now held something I was afraid to name, something that made the choice both harder and simpler than it should have been. I stood at the estate gates as dawn broke over the mansion grounds, a suitcase at my feet containing the money Dante had promised along with documents for new identities. A fresh start, far from the dangers of his world. The overnight rain had cleared, revealing an unexpected beauty to the estate I had barely noticed during our hurried arrival days ago. Gardens glistened with dewdrops, roses blooming despite the autumn chill, the stone walls that had seemed imposing now appearing protective rather than imprisoning. My perception of Dante had undergone a similar transformation, from monster to complex man, shaped by circumstances eerily similar to my own, both of us forced to grow up too quickly, to shoulder responsibilities we never asked for, to make impossible choices for the sake of those we loved. Marco had already made his decision, choosing to stay after Dante offered him a position in the legitimate tech company that served as one branch of the Ricci empire. My brother had found purpose here, his brilliant mind finally receiving the recognition and resources it deserved, and his quiet plea for me to consider staying had weighed heavily in my deliberations throughout the sleepless night. Dante approached silently, his tall figure cutting a sharp silhouette against the morning sky. Those striking features I had once feared now familiar in ways I was still coming to terms with. "I will not stop you," he said simply, his pale blue eyes holding mine with an intensity that spoke of restrained emotion, a vulnerability I never would have believed possible when I first glimpsed him in that corner office what felt like lifetimes ago. I know, I replied, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. That is why I am staying. His expression remained carefully controlled, but something shifted in his eyes, a light I had glimpsed only in rare, unguarded moments. I continued before he could speak, establishing boundaries that would allow me to live with this decision, with myself. I will work for your legitimate businesses only, I said firmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. I will not close my eyes to who you are, but I will not be part of that world. He nodded once, accepting my terms without argument, then stepped closer, close enough that I could catch the subtle scent of his cologne mingling with the morning air. I protect what matters to me, he said, his voice low and intense, somehow, against all logic, that has become you. 6 months later, I sat at my desk in the downtown office building where I ran the Ricci Charitable Foundation, my accounting degree finally put to proper use as I directed funds toward community programs, scholarships for underprivileged youth, and medical research. Marco thrived in the tech division, his innovations already earning patents and recognition in the industry. Each evening, I still personally cleaned Dante's private office before he drove us both to the home we now shared, maintaining the dynamic that had brought us together while building something neither of us had dared imagine that night when an invisible cleaning woman accidentally witnessed too much.